Eviba Carter, thank you for joining us all the way from St. Louis.
Yep, glad to be here.
Yeah, it's been a little while coming. Tawny's been talking about you for quite a while
Our
now.
entire relationship.
Yeah, she's always talking about this dude Carter who is obsessed with skin and the science of skin. And I've been kind of mirroring and copying little bits and pieces of her skin regime protocol, getting
And basically
better.
forcing Slug on his face every night. And now he does it on his own. But in the beginning, I had to do it for him.
Right, and
He's
wearing
hooked.
sunscreen every day now, so like small steps. But that's the kind of backstory, I guess, for how this came about. So Tawny and you have known each other for a while, and she was always talking about how educated you were. You and I had a couple phone calls. We then got a chance to hang out in St. Louis, and I was like, wow, I need to get this guy on the show. There's a lot of our listeners who will be interested in what they can do to help treat certain skin conditions like rosacea or pigmentation. And then, of course, many people interested in preserving youthfulness. So there's a lot of things, I guess, that are in your wheelhouse that we want to pick your brain about today. And this, you're a bit of a guinea pig, I guess, because this is the first time Tawny's joining us on the show.
I know. He asked. I was like, I don't think you need me, but I'm so happy to hang out with you and Carter at the notorious table. So we have a lot of questions, and I feel like you are the guy to answer them. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this will be an interesting dynamic. We'll see where it goes. Tawny's definitely funnier than I am. And maybe a little less filtered. But
I'm into it. You seem pretty into it.
I do have
so.
the odd dad joke or two, though.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna be so sad if you don't fit one in. And if you have any dad jokes, just feel free to say something really serious and then ask us the dad joke and then see if it goes over in either of our heads.
We're interested in I guess beginning here in understanding like where did this all start for you? I know you're doing a double degree in medicine and a PhD.
That's correct, yeah.
Right. And eventually you become, or soon to become, a dermatologist and a scientist, researcher. So congrats on that. I'm sure
Thank you.
That's keeping you very busy. And we've seen your apartment, which resembles more of a laboratory.
It's amazing.
That is my research and development lab where I make a new Eviba product.
Right.
Yeah.
So where does that obsession, if it is an obsession in the kind of science of skin, come from?
I mean, my journey in skin and medicine started in high school because I had pretty bad acne in high school. And it affected me so much. Like when I had a breakout, I just didn't want to go to school, And it was weird because so many people have acne. It's so normal. But for the person experiencing it, it feels so terrible to just go out in public and have acne. And I remember one time I broke my leg and I showed up to school on crutches and that's like a real physical injury. I couldn't walk and I didn't care. I went to school just fine. But I had a breakout and it was worse than that, right? In terms of my perception of myself. And so just the products that my mom was buying me or whatever weren't working. And I started reading research papers, just, clinical trials on the basic, acne fighting ingredients and cleared my skin up pretty well. And it just inspired me because in the simplest terms, I just saw that you can just go and look up exactly what people did and whether it worked or not, and then apply those methods and improve your own life. And so that inspired me for my whole career in medicine, really.
What's that process look like today? I'm sure that's evolved from when you were younger. So now when you're interested in kind of answering some question, or someone asks you a question and you think, I don't really know the answer to that. I'm going to go away and research. Where do you start, and how does that look in terms of coming to some type of position that you're then comfortable, going on TikTok, for example? You're blowing up on TikTok. Well done on that.
So fun.
Walk us through what that process looks like.
Yeah. So it really depends how familiar I am in the field that I'm looking at. So if I don't know that much of a field, I'll start by looking at like a review paper that kind of describes, the field of research as it stands and gives a little introduction to what's relevant and things like that before I start reading individual clinical trials. But if it's something that I am familiar with, then I'll go straight to the, primary literature, the clinical trials that are done, and I'll read those. And there's always so much cross-referencing, especially now as I mature as a scientist, I'm reading more critically. These papers, because there's so much literature, a lot of it is conflicting, and really you have to read critically and synthesize, all of the papers that you read as a whole. And that's the most challenging part.
I'm so glad that you said that. So I had, this is off topic, but I had an episode last week on someone else's show. And it was kind of like they set it up as to be like a nutritional debate. And the guy that I was debating, his position was nutrition research is confusing. So we should just not focus on it and just go with stories, anecdotes. And I was pushing back. But the main point I was trying to make was that, yeah, it is confusing. But as a professional, your job is to have the literacy to get into that confusion, make sense of it, and then communicate that.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think also we can make decisions based on the best information we have. So even if there are holes in the literature, we have to make some decision. And even if the research is flawed or incomplete, until more research is published, it doesn't mean we do the opposite of what the current literature suggests,
Yeah, like what's more likely, more probable, even if there's not complete certainty.
Yeah, it's just like if you're a gambler or something, like there's certain plays, certain moves that are just wrong, statistically or whatever, and people would think you're a bad player for doing them.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing in scientific research, especially in nutrition, where the research is often incomplete just because of the difficulty of doing that type of research. Like we can't just put people in cages for their whole life and feed them certain diets.
Or placebo is tough when it comes to food as well.
Exactly. Like you can't have two different groups of people where we feed them certain diets, and we probably never will have that.
Right. So you got to make the most of what you have. You're putting out a lot of information now on social media, on TikTok. What's like the most viral kind of post or topic you've covered so far, or something that you've seen the most engagement with?
So viral and engagement. So I think my first viral video was one where I talked about how carotenoids can change your skin color. So with carotenoids, they're the pigments that make a lot of fruits and vegetables the color that they are. So beta carotene makes carrots orange, and lycopene makes tomatoes red. And there is a whole spectrum of carotenoids. And the cool thing about carotenoids is that when you consume them, we accumulate them in the fat underneath our skin, and it can change the color of our skin. And it's subtle, but that subtle change in color makes a huge difference in terms of how healthy you appear to other people. And there's a lot of literature on this where they apply these transformations to look at more or less carotenoid colored images, and people find carotenoid colored images of people regardless of the ethnicity or regardless of the race of the person in the picture or the person perceiving the images. They find carotenoid color to be more attractive. And this is really fascinating because it's almost as if we're displaying the richness of our diet on our skin, like a trophy to others.
I love that.
Like the wealth of our diets is apparent on our skin. And you can sort of see it sometimes when someone has a poor diet, their skin looks a little pale, a little sickly. And that's a real thing. And so people really resonated with that. And I've seen a lot of people post about eating carrots, and carrots aren't extremely high in beta carotene, and also that beta carotene isn't particularly bioavailable, especially if they're not cooked. But plenty of other foods have carotenoids too. It's not just carrots. So it's sweet potatoes, it's tomatoes, and I take carotenoid supplements. So that's what I was talking about in that video: is high dose carotenoids, more than you could get in a normal diet to get a really noticeable change in skin color. But that was my first viral video. So it was my 8th video that I posted, and it got a really good response. Yeah.
Those are fat soluble, right? So do you take those supplements with a meal? Is that how someone would do it?
That's correct. And that's a good point, because I've seen a lot of supplements that try to use the doses that I talked about and make them into a pill, but they're in dry capsules, which has questionable absorption. So I take them in liquid soft gels that are filled with oil. So the carotenoids are dissolved in oil, and then I consume that always with a meal to get the right absorption. And so one side effect of carotenoid consumption a lot of times is that it will turn your stool red. And
which can stress some people out.
It stresses some people out. It's benign. It doesn't harm you. But one thing that I've noticed just talking to so many hundreds of people after I made this viral video about it is that often the people who have red stool are the ones who say that the carotenoids aren't changing their color. And I think it's because it's passing. And a lot of times I talk to these people and they weren't taking it with food, or they were taking like a dry capsule with powder and not an oil-filled gel cap. And I think that is important.
That reminds me, once I consumed an obscene amount of beetroots. And I called my mom. I was like, I think I have cancer.
Oh yeah, that'll turn your
Something's wrong. I was in my
different color.
I was in my 20s. Is there a dose if someone was to supplement with carotenoids that would be advisable, recommended? And is there like a particular carotenoid, or are you just what are you looking for on the label? Yeah.
So I think the dose. What I did is I just sort of titrated up. So I started with a lower dose and I worked my way up, and I waited, months in between. So it was a long process just to see where I noticed the most skin color change and where it kind of plateaued, where I took more and it didn't give me any more color to my skin. And
what was the low dose that you started at, and then what did you end up at?
So I've been taking 12 milligrams of astaxanthin for years. And so that was kind of the baseline, but then I added 20 milligrams of lycopene. I increased that to 50 milligrams of lycopene. Now I'm taking 12 milligrams of 12 milligrams of astaxanthin and 50 milligrams of lycopene daily.
With a meal.
With a meal. And I take those at separate times. So to increase absorption, because there's potentially a limit to how much carotenoids you can absorb at once. So splitting them up as much as possible is helpful.
Is that just to make you more attractive? You are very attractive.
It's all the carotenoids. You should have seen it before carotenoids.
Like, is this supplement protocol just to increase attractiveness? Not that there's anything wrong with that, or is there also an element of like protection from the sun when you're doing that?
So that's a great point, and something we talked about before. The carotenoids also protect your skin from the sun. And I think this is super underappreciated, because although carotenoids, and not just carotenoids, but there's other antioxidants that when taken orally can protect your skin from the sun, I think that they're underrated because this protection can't wash off, right? So I wear sunscreen every day. It's an absolute must in a skincare routine. I'm sure we're going to get to skincare routine later. But the problem is, like, I have a UV camera. If I put the UV camera on my face, I put the sunscreen on, I give a good wipe, there's a line of missing sunscreen. You know what I mean? You can wipe it off so easy. And it wears off during the day. And it's not always possible to just keep reapplying so frequently. You don't notice when you're rubbing your nose or something and you get some protection. So I think we're already supporting the idea that you should be using like clothing as protection. And then in addition to that, sunscreen. So like the sunscreen is like kind of the backup to the wide brim hat and the protective clothing. I think we need to be considering this as like a 3-layer system. You know what I mean? We need to be wearing our protective clothing. We need to be avoiding the sun in peak hours, things like that. We need to be wearing sunscreen, and we need to be thinking about our diet and supplementation as another factor, because this protection can't wear off. It lasts all day long. Even when you wipe your sunscreen off, you want that. It's not super potent, but it is some amount of protection that is indefeatable. And I really appreciate that.
That's interesting. So most carotenoids would come in through the diet through plant foods, not exclusively though. There are some carotenoids in certain seafoods, like astaxanthin's found in shrimp, right?
Astaxanthin. There are multiple carotenoids in shellfish, canthaxanthin, astaxanthin, and I believe others, but we can get an appreciable, that's in the shell of the animal mostly. And so we can get appreciable amounts in salmon, not the amount that we're getting in a supplement though.
Yeah, it makes me think, and I doubt there's any scientific or published evidence of this, but I see anecdotes online of people who adopt a carnivore diet. Have you seen this online, this trend?
I've seen carnivore diet.
Right. So people eating only meat.
Yeah.
And that one of the supposed benefits that you'll see people claim is that when they removed seed oils from their diet, I'm sure they removed a myriad of other things, but they'll specifically say seed oils and eat an only meat diet, that they no longer burn in the sun. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but
We can look into it.
explain the rationale here.
I don't know. This is not, it's not my, I guess, area of expertise.
I have seen, not in the context of carnivore specifically, but people talking about in my comments that removing seed oils from their diet prevents them from getting sunburned. And I think they think it's because of reduced inflammation or something like that. I haven't looked too deeply into it. But I don't think it's, I don't think that's the case. I think, let's find some people and burn them. They'll be,
let's find some people and burn them.
I would bet money that they would burn.
I'm not sure that's going to pass the ethics board. But, how do you feel when you log onto TikTok or Instagram and scroll? How do you think we're doing overall when it comes to the advice and recommendations that you see are being put out there for skincare and sunscreen and just preserving the youthfulness of skin in general? Is it just as much of a minefield as the nutrition sphere is, or do you generally see pretty good information being put out?
I mean, absolutely. It really depends on your algorithm, right? So I think that I tend to see pretty good advice because a lot of the people that I follow are doctors and dermatologists, and it's not all perfect advice, but on average, it's pretty good. But I see some things that my friends send me, just very concerning skincare tips that are likely harmful.
Like, did you see the salmon? People are injecting salmon fat into their face.
Salmon sperm.
Salmon sperm, nonetheless, into their faces. Do you think that's sound advice? Something people should try?
So that is not salmon sperm in its entirety. What they do is they extract the nucleic acids, like the DNA from salmon sperm. And I don't remember the exact rationale for it, but the DNA that comes from salmon sperm is most biocompatible with us. So least likely to cause an immune response. It might be due to some modifications to the DNA that they don't have that would tip our immune system off. I would need to look that up, but that is an approved treatment in Korea. And
Does Korea lead the way in a lot of this stuff?
I think Korea invest the most time and money into this kind of stuff. And a lot of the products are really good, but I think that there is like a return on investment curve, you know what I mean, for a lot of things. And I think that a lot of the things that I see in Korean skincare are unlikely to be effective.
Right. Is most of the research that's being done in dermatology, is it related to specific skin conditions like acne and rosacea, things like of that nature, or are you seeing is most of the funding going into compounds and products in the kind of more anti-aging youthfulness world?
It depends on the type of research. Like you see a lot of anti-aging papers, but they're generally small studies like funded by industry. So I tend to read a lot of those papers because those are the ones that my audience sends me a lot to talk about. But higher quality papers are generally done on skin diseases. I think it's getting increasingly confusing for consumers. Like say you walk into Sephora, right? Not to name one store in particular because they're all kind of following the same trend here, where the majority of the brands have a before and after photo and X% saw a reduction in wrinkles or X% saw improvement in pigmentation, and then underneath it a citation of a study. So you're spending time looking at a lot of these studies that are being conducted by companies, and this is a very broad question, so it's not specific to one company or one study, but generally speaking, what are the quality of these studies, and are they more marketing than science, or are these companies legitimately investing in good science? I think in general, the science isn't great. I think you can read them critically and make an assessment. And I think in science, the one thing you can trust is that when you read the paper, they generally did what they described and they got the results that they're telling you about. But their conclusions are what we need to scrutinize more. What does this really mean, for our skin? Or was this the right way to test this particular question? And a lot of times it's not. So like, for example, in a lot of studies where they're testing like topical peptides really don't penetrate the skin well. Some of them might penetrate well enough to have an effect. But one thing about peptides is they moisturize the skin, and it doesn't matter what peptide it is. So a peptide, going back, is sort of a chain of amino acids, and amino acids are like small proteins, and our body uses them as signaling molecules. So a certain order of amino acids is almost like a key in a lock for a receptor to tell our skin cells to do something. And so these papers are trying to say that they've made this special key that unlocks some special attribute of skin, right? It causes some change in your skin. When in fact, this key might not be even getting under the skin. It might be sitting on top of the skin. And that could be just as well a cheap collagen peptide or something like that, as well as some expensive synthesized peptide that they make. And the way that you tell the difference is by using the exact same vehicle, but using a peptide control. So just some random peptide or collagen peptide or something. So you can see if it's better than that. You know what I mean? Because every peptide you apply to the skin is basically going to moisturize your skin. It's going to make it, because your skin's hydrated, reduce wrinkles a little bit, things like that. If they're not comparing it to a random peptide, then it's hard to say like how effective it really is.
Right. That makes me think of ingestible collagen, which we'll come to. But early on, a lot of the studies were comparing consumption of collagen against nothing, as opposed to against whey protein or some other equivalent gram of a different protein. So in that instance, it's presumably very hard for the average person to walk into a store like Sephora and know if what they're buying is actually effective and worth the money that they're outlaying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I think is really hard to address, because that's really a scientific literacy issue. And I think if more people knew how to read and understand science, this wouldn't be as big of a problem. But that's such an enormous thing to overcome. That's a whole change to our education system.
Yeah, I think it's asking a little too much for everyone to have the however many years of training that's required to dig into literacy. It would, to me, seem like there just has to be better regulation around the claims that can be made, and then elevation of people like you that are actually communicating good information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's correct. I think that we need some minimal level of scientific literacy so that people can tell the difference between someone who's really engaging with the research and isn't, because I think a lot of the worst examples of skin and science influencers, they are using the language of science, in their descriptions. And people find that very compelling, even though they're not talking about real science,
What are the red flags that you notice that might be clues for when someone finds an account online that, maybe they're science-y, but they're not actually giving evidence-based recommendations?
I mean, mostly it's because I will see them and then I'll go to the literature and I'll be like, that's not what this says.
But are there any clues for a layperson?
A layperson. I think overly conclusive or dramatic claims, so a lot of people, when I say something, they'll be like, oh, isn't this harmful? And I'll be like, oh, there's no evidence of this causing harm. And they'll be confused about why I'm not so confident about that, even though this is something that maybe has been used for dozens of years and there really is no evidence. It's hard for me to say that this does not cause harm, not because I'm not as certain as one could even be, but just because that's the language of science. And so I think people that make really strong, dramatic claims is a red flag.
Yeah, that's a conflation of uncertainty with not being well read and well versed on a topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not true. Like you say, uncertainty is a part of science and good communication.
Yeah, because we were talking about earlier with nutrition science, the field is never going to be complete, or every scientist's job would be done already.
Yeah, and it would be boring.
Right. And so the more you know about a field, the more you realize what the field doesn't know, and you get less and less certain. And so someone who really understands like the limits of their knowledge and the limits of the knowledge in that field, that's a big green flag.
Have you seen the like Dunning-Kruger curve?
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that speaks to exactly what you're saying. Like at the very beginning, when you start studying something, you absorb a whole lot of information at once and you think, gosh, I understand it all. And you want to, shout about it to everyone. And then as time goes on, and that's the highest confidence you'll ever have. Time goes on, you're accumulating more and more and more information and your confidence is just coming down.
Exactly.
Don't they call that the top amount stupid? Right, when you get introduced and learn about something.
Yeah, all the time I see people like making just trolls of my comments, and I want to just comment, you're Dunning-Krugered so hard, my friend. I wish I could help.
Too many trolls to address.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you make skincare because I've been purchasing and promoting your skincare by word of mouth since the day I tried it. And I trust you because of the way you communicate. You don't use absolutes and you say that depends, and you use the language that Simon was just referring to, which is really helpful, which some people get confused as to if you know something or not because you're seemingly uncertain. But when it comes to your skin products that you promote and when it goes into creating these products, what is your concern? Is it more skin health or beautification? And is there a difference between the two?
I mean, I think that they overlap a lot, definitely. I think when we're talking about beauty, there's so much more that goes into it besides just the skin, you know what I mean? Your attitude and personality is a part of it, and your style, all that. But when we're talking about skin, I think healthy skin is beautiful skin. And a lot of what I'm trying to do is make the skin healthier in my skincare products, for sure.
Yeah. What's your favorite skin product that you make?
Well, my favorite one is the one that I have available now called Slug Plus. And so that is an occlusive moisturizer for nighttime use. So it's similar to, if you're familiar with slugging, you definitely are. What I wanted to do was make a high-end skincare product to slug with, because most people just slug with Vaseline if they do slug, but that turns a lot of people off. Vaseline doesn't seem like a high-end skincare product, and also that's a whole step in your skincare routine that could be used as a vehicle for so many effective skincare active ingredients. And so I wanted to make a complete high-end skincare product for slugging specifically, and so that's how Slug Plus was born.
Okay, let's define a few terms here because you guys are talking another language. What's slugging?
So
he knows.
Remember, I'm new to this conversation.
We slug every night.
No, I know that I use the slug product, but I think people are probably listening thinking, what on earth is slugging? What are they talking about? Yeah. And maybe we actually even just take a giant step back. My go-to brand for all things protein and creatine is Momentous. To help reach my daily protein target, I complement my diet with 1.5 scoops of Momentous's chocolate or vanilla chai plant-based protein for 30 grams of protein and all essential amino acids, which supports muscle growth, hormone and collagen production, skin health, and recovery. I also consume 10 grams of Momentous's creatine daily to enhance energy production, muscle strength, bone health, and cognition, with studies now showing the benefit of creatine on short-term memory and intelligence. I'll do anything for a little extra brain power. Both products are NSF certified for sport. This certification is the only third-party certification program trusted by the NBA, MLB, Ironman, etc. NSF certification means you can rest easy knowing you're actually getting what's on the label and nothing more. So if you're interested in making a true investment in your health, why not join the best in human performance and be a part of the change in raising the bar on supplements? Our friends at Momentous are giving you permission to take care of you first this holiday season with exclusive early access to their Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale for all listeners of The Proof. Until November 25th, you can use the code LIVINGPROOF at checkout on livemomentous.com for 25% off all of your favorite supplements and receive a free gift of 5 nights of their best-selling sleep packs for orders over $75. That's code LIVINGPROOF at livemomentous.com through November 25th. What does a foundational skincare kind of just regime protocol look like? And then where does slugging fit in with that?
Yeah. So I think then we should start talking about moisturizers in general. So with a moisturizer, there's three sort of types of moisturizers. One is a humectant, and a humectant is like hyaluronic acid, where it sort of absorbs and holds water like a sponge to your skin. So that's one way of moisturizing. Another is an emollient. And so emollient like smooths your skin or changes your skin's texture to make it look better. And then we have an occlusive. So when we're talking about slugging, it's sort of like a moisturizer can be all of these things. Like a complete product is going to have probably some humectants, emollients, and some sort of occlusive moisturizer like a petrolatum or a silicone, right? So slugging is taking the occlusive side to the extreme. It's when we have a moisturizer that's purely occlusive, usually like petrolatum, Vaseline. And the reason we do this is because occlusion is really the most effective type of moisturization. It really heals your skin the most. It restores your skin's moisture barrier and improves your barrier function so that your skin is less sensitive to allergens and irritants. And it does this in many ways, but for just one example, it causes your skin to produce more of a protein called filaggrin, which binds the skin cells together to form a nice barrier. And this occurs so that even like after you wash the product off, your skin barrier is still more functional.
So the occlusive properties are kind of trapping moisture in. Is that the right way of thinking about that?
That's correct. And that's what most people think about occlusion. Is the general idea is that it traps moisture underneath the barrier. So you have a thick barrier, say of Vaseline, it's trapping moisture underneath. But what I'm saying is that in doing that, your skin starts healing itself. It starts improving its own barrier function so that your skin becomes healthier over time. Yeah.
And is that like we put the Slug Plus product on, and I should make this clear, this is not a paid endorsement for Slug Plus. I never accept money. I get offered money all the time by people to come on the show. And it's something I haven't done for 300 plus episodes. Unless times get difficult and it's hard to pay the bills, I plan to continue that. But
I'm just really excited to talk about things that work.
This
is incredible. Sorry.
It does work. But just to kind of, I guess, explain how we're using it in our life, we put the Slug on at nighttime, like after a moisturizer. It's like the last thing that goes on. Then you go to bed, and at least I'm not using it in the morning or during the day. It's just like a one time at night thing as the last thing that you put on. Is that the right way to use it?
That's correct. So you can really use it anytime. And I've heard people that tell me they use it day and night. They just go out sluggy. But the thing
sluggy,
is that
he means that it's shiny, it's greasy, it's thick. It's very noticeable.
So normally you would use it at night before you go to bed once you've turned off the lights and you don't have to be on camera anymore. But you slug over your other skincare as the last step. And so you're saying you use it over a moisturizer, and that's great if you have a moisturizer that has active ingredients that you still want to benefit from, but you don't necessarily have to use it as a moisturizer. You're going to get as much moisturization as you need just from the occlusion. One thing that should be noted is that you should be careful applying it over strong actives, so like exfoliating acids or retinoids. A lot of people will tell you that you can't slug over these active ingredients, but really you just want to be careful, take it slow. When I used to use tretinoin, I would apply that a few hours before I slugged. And the thing that slugging does is it's going to increase the absorption of these active ingredients and make them stronger and more potent. So I would just use a little less tretinoin, and that worked perfectly.
That's really cool. Well, for me personally, if I was to not have used it and not have known you so well, hearing about the product and seeing the product, like for instance, you sent me the product for free. You're like, here, I want you to try this. And it took you months of convincing me to just try to use it because I'm acne prone. If I use anything oily, greasy, thick, I'm going to break out.
Yeah.
You're like, trust me, please just use it. You'll see. Yeah. I used it. I have not had a single breakout, and I've been using it for years. I've given it to all my friends. Everyone's like, what the hell is this? This is absolutely incredible. Let me get my hands on it. But it's somewhat of an intimidating product because it is so thick, right? Because someone who's acne prone would look at it and go, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how it truly does sit on the outside of your skin. It doesn't penetrate. Well, at least the thick parts don't seem to, and don't clog the skin, which I think is like an absolute anomaly. It's amazing.
I mean, I think it just comes from people misunderstanding what causes acne. The product does penetrate. That's how it gets the active ingredients into the skin. But it definitely doesn't clog your pores. And there's a study, and it wasn't even recent. And it was a study that was done a while ago where they took people and they put Vaseline on their skin, or they had a control. And the Vaseline group actually had slightly less inflammatory acne. So this greasy layer on the surface of your skin is not causing acne at all. In fact, it's helping a little bit. I wouldn't say to someone with acne, oh, just use Vaseline, it'll all go away. But it is something that will help a little bit. And it's such a misunderstanding. Yeah.
Right, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a pink tub of Vaseline.
Yeah.
Like when I first saw it, I was like, no way I'm putting this on my face.
Yeah.
I know. I did a lot of convincing.
I mean,
all right, let's we're doing this in reverse. So if that's the last thing that you're putting on at night, and we just think about moisturizers more broadly. You mentioned there that if you're using a moisturizer, it's not necessary, but if the moisturizer contains actives, you might want to use the moisturizer. When you say actives, what are we talking about? And I guess what makes, in your view, a good moisturizer versus one that's not as good?
I think a good moisturizer is really a simple moisturizer. And Slug Plus is taking that to the extreme with being mostly petrolatum. But I think adding a lot of scents, adding a lot of essential oils, things like this, I would consider that, or like plant extracts, just really long ingredient list. And this is a very general rule, right? Because there's good moisturizers that have long ingredient lists. But I would say in general, you want something simple. And in the morning, you're going to want something light just so that it doesn't make your face look greasy. And then in the evening, something more occlusive. And I think an occlusive moisturizer, whether it's Slug Plus or Vaseline or any of the other like occlusive moisturizers, thick ones, you think, I think that's essential for a nighttime routine.
Is there a real difference, or a need rather, for eye cream? Like we will run out of eye cream and we just start using our moisturizer.
Or is it just face? Is it face moisturizer incognito?
Is it necessary?
What's happening?
Is there a difference?
There can be slightly different formulas for an eye cream, but in general, I don't think they're necessary. I think that you can apply your regular anti-aging routine as long as it doesn't irritate the area around your eyes. I think that it can be applied to the eyes, and you don't need a separate product for the eyes.
Okay, that's really cool. And on actives, you mentioned actives. What are your favorite actives? Are there some you should stay away from if you have something like rosacea? Like what are some bangers and what are some testy ones?
Yeah, I think it depends what your skin concerns are. So it's hard to say what are good actives, but I think that most people could benefit from a retinoid. So retinol is one that you can get in like skincare products. You can also get adapalene, and I think this is one of the best kept secrets in skincare, is that there's a retinoid called adapalene, and you can buy it, brand name Differin, at the store. And now Differin has a bunch of products, so make sure it's the adapalene one. And this is it was prescription strength, then it went over the counter for acne. So you can buy this product for acne, and the thing is that they're not allowed to market it for anti-aging or skincare because it's a drug. So you can't market off-label uses of a drug. So they can't say this reduces wrinkles or this, improves your skin in other ways. All they can say it's an acne product, and you'll find it in the acne aisle, but it will improve your wrinkles and work, similar to tretinoin.
So those are two separate actives that you just named, and two that you can use with each other. And what would be the percentages, or if I was to go buy one? I know you mentioned the brand of one, but what am I looking for percentage-wise in a product of those two actives?
So adapalene, the over-the-counter version, is going to be 0.1%. So you'll be looking for that. With retinol, it varies. So there's weaker and stronger ones, and there's also, other retinoids. So there's a whole variety, but I think that the most data is on retinol versus like a retinaldehyde or something like that. You can experiment with different ones, but I think starting low and just titrating up slowly is the best.
And so adapalene and tretinoin are just as effective as one another?
So there isn't enough research to say exactly which one is more effective. But there is research showing that adapalene is non-inferior. I don't remember like what percent tretinoin it was.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but so you have to kind of work your way up in terms of frequency. So you're not getting like your skin irritated. That's right. So what does that look like if someone starts using adapalene? What's a typical kind of frequency protocol for that? And is there any truth to the idea that you become more photosensitive when you're using these retinoids and have to be really careful going out in the sun?
Yeah. So to start retinoid, so if you're using adapalene, tretinoin, or any other retinoid, I would recommend starting like every third day. So you take 2 days off and 1 day on. And with retinoids, it's a long-term commitment, right? You want to be using these things for years. Don't go too fast, right? You have a whole lifetime to benefit from these active ingredients. So for 2 weeks, I would say every third day. And then after 2 weeks, go every other day. And then after another 2 weeks, then 2 days on, 1 day off. And then after that, after another 2 weeks, then every day. And if at any point you move up and your skin feels irritated, then take another 2 weeks, take as much time as you need, because you don't want to damage your skin or irritate your skin with these ingredients. If you take it slow, you should be able to ramp up with at least minimal irritation.
And take us on the retinol journey. When you put that on your skin and it's absorbed, where's it going and what's it doing? How are we actually getting some sort of benefit? Is it affecting collagen production, or what's the kind of, I guess, high level mechanism of action?
So retinoids have multiple mechanisms of action. They increase your skin's turnover. So your older skin is coming off sooner so that your skin appears younger and more vibrant. They reduce oil production in the skin, which can improve acne. So this is why adapalene and tretinoin are prescriptions for acne. They reduce hyperkeratinization, which is the hardening of the skin around the pore that can lead to acne. And they affect the behavior of melanocytes such that they become less overactive and you get less sunspots.
Is it something you do in your morning routine or nighttime before moisturizer, or it doesn't matter?
So typically retinoids are used at night because many of them are photosensitive, especially tretinoin. So if you're using tretinoin, the amount of light in your house probably isn't going to degrade. So there's a study, and I see a lot of creators talk about how there's a study where they exposed tretinoin to a fluorescent light, but they use an insanely strong one right over it when you actually read the paper, which is just not how it is in a home environment. You're not just sitting with your face directly to an industrial strength fluorescent light.
Unless you're doing a podcast.
But even then, this amount of light isn't even close to what they did in that study. So I don't think you have to worry about that, but I think you wouldn't want to go and put tretinoin on and then go stand in the sun. There could be a significant amount of degradation of that active ingredient there. But with adapalene, the great thing is that it's very photostable. So it doesn't break up in the sun, and you could potentially use it at any time of the day, but I think most people still use it at night.
What other actives? We started here, this Tawny asked, what are your favorite actives? So retinols are up there. The other ones that I come across frequently are hyaluronic acid, niacinamide.
Yeah.
What else do you see?
Vitamin C, baby.
Vitamin C. So those three there, I guess people are exposed to quite a lot in cosmetic stores. Do they have any kind of real role or purpose or efficacy?
Yeah, I think that vitamin C or a vitamin C derivative is one thing that I would consider part of a core acne regimen.
Acne regimen.
Sorry, skincare.
Gotcha.
Skincare regimen. Yeah. So with vitamin C, the trick is that vitamin C is very unstable in solution. So it needs to be stabilized by other antioxidants. And it's also absorbed very poorly. And so vitamin C as an acid, this may be hard to imagine, but an acid has a proton that can come off, right? And the proton is positively charged. So if it comes off, then the vitamin C molecule is negatively charged. And a charged molecule has difficulty penetrating the skin. So this proton is less likely to come off if there's a bunch of other protons in the solution. And so when you have an acidic solution, a low pH solution, that proton stays on, the molecule is not charged, and it can penetrate the skin. And so you need that combination of a stabilizing antioxidant and an acidic solution in order to have a good vitamin C product. And very few vitamin C products hit the mark there. So like one that does is SkinCeuticals vitamin C, but that's very expensive. And one of the reasons is because they have a patent. So they have a patent for stabilizing vitamin C with particular antioxidants. They've demonstrated that that works, and at a certain pH range. But other companies make dupes where they get around it by using a different stabilizing antioxidant or just going right outside the pH range that SkinCeuticals patent covers. So I really like timeless vitamin C, and I like prequel vitamin C. So those are my two sort of favorite budget options as
we might create a downloadable PDF that summarizes a lot of this information for people listening. Is SkinCeuticals generally a pretty reliable brand?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that they're reliable. You can't go wrong with the SkinCeuticals CE ferulic, but it's just expensive. It's hard to say that it's a good value, when we have other dupes that are.
How does vitamin C actually work? I know vitamin C is important for collagen production. Mm-hmm. Is that what's happening with the topical vitamin C? And if someone's getting enough vitamin C in their diet, does a topical vitamin C, is there still a role or place for it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're not going to get the concentrations of vitamin C necessary to have these effects, which are collagen production. It's an antioxidant, so it's going to reduce oxidative stress in your skin. It's going to reduce hyperpigmentation as well. These aren't things that you're going to get from an oral vitamin C supplement or from your diet. These are something that's only going to be able to be achieved by a topical application.
And what about hyaluronic acid or niacinamide?
I think hyaluronic acid isn't one of my favorite ingredients.
Overrated?
I think it's overrated. I think hyaluronic acid is overrated. So we're talking about the different types of moisturizers, and hyaluronic acid is a humectant. So it holds on to water, holds water to your skin like a sponge. And the problem is that, one, I don't think it's completely necessary to have a humectant. I think in a daytime moisturizer, it's good. There can be many options. But with hyaluronic acid, it's either high molecular weight, where it stays on the surface of the skin and just acts as a humectant, holding moisture there. But the problem is that low molecular weight hyaluronic acid, so hyaluronic acid that's been broken up into two small pieces, can cause inflammation. So we have hyaluronic acid in our skin, and one of the things our body does is we have immune cells that go around looking for what's called DAMPs, damage associated molecular patterns. And so if your skin gets damaged, the hyaluronic acid in your skin is going to get damaged. And then your immune system recognizes that and starts a process of inflammation. And so this has been shown to occur, at least in some contexts, with hyaluronic acid. And there really isn't much other benefit to it. So as a humectant, I would much prefer to see like urea or something, which can improve hyperkeratinization and other things with your skin. It reduces inflammation, and I would much prefer to see it. I don't really avoid hyaluronic acid, but it's not something that I look for or specifically add to my skincare routine.
It's so crazy. It's everywhere. There's a huge push for hyaluronic acid in products. I mean, right now it's also peptides, but it just seems so important. Yeah. So it's so interesting to hear the science behind it and a different point of view.
And not just moisturizers, you see the serums, hyaluronic acid serums as well. And I always, again, this is not my area of science, but the marketing has suggested to me that they're great for maintaining moisture in your skin. And a lot of what we're talking about is moisture. So is the hydration of our skin, is that a key part of skin health and sort of slowing down the rate of aging of skin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that people really focus on actives. And I'm not saying don't use actives, but I think just having a good moisturizer and using it regularly and making sure your skin doesn't dry out is going to be great for like your long-term anti-aging. because like I was talking about earlier with how using an occlusive moisturizer can increase, filaggrin production and improve your moisture barrier. The same thing can be said about drying out your skin. You produce less of that. There's enzymes in your skin called matrix metalloproteinases, which are going to be expressed if your skin is dry or inflamed or something like that, which go and eat collagen. We have collagen eating enzymes. And so we want to avoid that.
How important is hydration through the water that we drink?
I think that's also overrated. I generally think that we should.
All right, Dave, take this off the table.
No more water.
I think that you should drink when you're thirsty.
Yes.
You definitely should never become dehydrated. But I was reading a study a while ago, and I forget the exact amounts, but it was like Americans drink over twice the amount of water as Europeans. You know what I mean? And there's just no reason to think that would be improving our skin, really. I think that we should, like I said, we should drink when we're thirsty. Other than that, we have kidneys that regulate everything for us. So
sounds like very sensible, non-viral advice.
We need more of this.
I want clickbait stuff.
Yeah, and like your water needs.
What about losing water through running and sauna?
Yeah.
Does that have an effect on the hydration level of skin?
Yeah, absolutely. But your skin, you're going to lose some volume, if you become dehydrated. And that can make you look a little gaunt, but that's really not going to affect, I think, the health of your skin long term. Your water needs are going to change depending on the temperature, your activity level, substances you're consuming. A lot of things are going to change the amount of water that you need, but you got to rely on your thirst for that. You don't need to have any type of schedule or a certain amount of water you need to hit every day. I think that's unnecessary.
Okay, true or false? Is sweating good for your skin? On purpose, gym, just sweating in general. Is it good for your skin?
Just keep in mind you're speaking to a professional yoga instructor.
Yeah, I think sweating isn't bad for your skin. I think exercise in general and activity is great for your skin. So there was a study that was looking particularly at resistance exercise. They were looking at resistance and endurance exercise, and both improved the skin. So improved the collagen density of the skin. And so, yeah, I think it is. I think that exercise in general is going to bring a lot of circulation to the skin, and it's going to improve skin quality. Yeah.
This is great news because I say exercising is good for your skin all the time.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah.
I may have gotten it from you back in the day.
Yeah, I made a video about it a while ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. Also, another curious question. So we've covered that staying hydrated, keeping the skin moisturized is good for the skin. Do you think that someone who lives in, let's say, Florida, super humid climate, is going to have youthful skin for longer because their skin is exposed to humidity rather than someone who's living in, say, Lake Tahoe at elevation, dry climate? Does that have an impact on the skin?
That's a great question. But I think we need to appreciate that the hydration level isn't the only factor here. Because in general, humidity is likely good for the skin. So if you have certain conditions, then a humid environment might not be great. But in general, humidity is better. But people in Florida are exposed to a lot of sun. And that is going to make a much bigger difference than hydration levels.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So far, actives, top of that list is retinols. A moisturizer essentially is something...
Retinoids,
Yeah, retinoids. And a moisturizer, we're looking for something pretty simple, not a long list of ingredients.
Right, no fragrances. I think that the fragrances is... People debate this a lot. So if you've been using a moisturizer for a long time, the fragrance doesn't irritate you, I think it's okay to stick with it. But especially if you have problem skin, one of the first things that I would recommend is find a simple... fragrance-free moisturizer.
Would you recommend any? Are there brands like Timeless and SkinCeuticals that you'd recommend for simple moisturizers?
I think a good place for people to start is just the basic ones. So your Vanicreams, your CeraVe, I think those are good options. La Roche-Posay has good moisturizers. So I think there's plenty of good, inexpensive moisturizers that you can use.
Right, so it's a myth that the $400 moisturizer is superior to the one that's 20 or 30 or 40.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the brand. I think that
what are some really opulent skin care brands?
So like La Mer, that one's silly.
Yeah, you see that in the airport everywhere.
Yeah.
Those are like $400.
They're very expensive.
Literally.
Little tub. I don't know, like $300.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, like their process, what gives value to this product is like their process where they play music and flash lights at the product as it's like fermenting. It's like clearly like not even trying to not be pseudoscience, to imbue it with vibes or something. So you're really paying for those vibes, and I don't think it's really helping the skin. I think that you're much better off. And I think another thing about expensive moisturizers, and this is the biggest reason why I don't recommend expensive moisturizers, is it encourages you to use less. You're not going to stick your fingers in a $300 tub of moisturizer and apply like a fourth of it. But the more you apply, in most cases, the better. The more occlusion you're going to get, the more effective your moisturizer is going to be.
It's a great point I haven't heard before.
So go for cheaper so you can be a little more liberal.
Yeah. I mean, application. Maybe not the $2 Amazon moisturizer. You don't know what's in it, but inexpensive, reliable brands, right? So, like I was saying, is it CeraVe, Vanny Cream, La Roche-Posay? I think those are all great options. Yeah.
It's good to know that eye cream isn't necessarily an end-all be-all or a part of your core routine. Correct me if I'm wrong, because eye creams are so expensive and they give you the tiniest amount of product. And like you say, it kind of contributes to using a little less and using it sparingly because, price points.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've never used an eye cream before.
Wow, look at those under eyes. This is great. Good to know.
I have a quote from you. You said, wrinkles get all the attention in skincare, but pigmentary changes age our appearance even more. Can you speak to that? I think it's an interesting idea to think about when you look at someone. What is it that determines the youthfulness? The common, I guess, perception here, or my, I guess, what sort of lay understanding was it's probably wrinkles, but it sounds like maybe it's not wrinkles as the thing that stands at the top of that list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a mistake to focus just on wrinkles. And for example, like some teenagers, if they have really expressive faces, if they're always smiling or always frowning, those 18-year-olds can have wrinkles, right? But you would never mistake them as an older person, And
you're looking at one. I've had these since I was 18, at least, or younger. Probably when I was 15. If I go back and look at photos, I've had smile lines around my eyes.
Exactly. So when you were 18,
he just called them smile lines around his eyes.
That's right.
I love me.
Aren't they?
They're crow's feet. It's so
crow's
cute.
feet. That sounds disgusting.
You can call them smile lines.
Crow's feet.
I've never heard that in my wee little life.
That's disgusting.
It's a real thing.
So it's possible that Simon would have had more wrinkles at 18 around his eyes than I have at 33. But if we stood next to each other, me and 18-year-old Simon, you would have known that Simon was younger, right? And there's so many cues that give off our age. And we can separate them sort of into ones that we can change, one that's easy to change, and ones that are a little bit harder. So the lowest hanging fruit is going to be the pigmentation. So the age spots, the freckles, the uneven complexion that we can get over time due to just general aging and sun exposure. These things can be addressed pretty effectively with tyrosinase inhibitors and antioxidants, right? And so I think this should be a much bigger focus. And that's why in Slug Plus, even though it's just a nightly moisturizer, I include what are usually considered skin whitening ingredients in Slug Plus, because I think that people in Western cultures aren't often looking for these ingredients that are typically used in like Asian or African cultures to whiten their skin, but in lower concentrations to improve your pigment and your complexion. And I think people aren't necessarily looking for that in a product, but when they apply that product and they see the effect on their skin and their skin looks so much younger, they really appreciate it.
And so that ingredient is a tyrosinase inhibitor?
So there is an ingredient called 4-butyl resorcinol, which is a tyrosinase inhibitor. And we also have tetrahexyldecyl ascorbate, which is a vitamin C derivative that is stabilized and made oil soluble to be in an occlusive formula like that.
I'm not going to ask you how to spell that.
I'll tell you later. THDA. Yeah, THDA.
How does that work? How does that improve pigmentation?
So we have an enzyme called tyrosinase, which is part of the process of melanin production. So it just interferes with that process, so your cells can't make melanin, and it tends to work better on the cells that are most overactive, evening out your complexion. The melanin producing cells that are most overactive, that even out your so you know what I'm saying.
How do you know if you have hyperpigmentation? That might seem like a really simple, silly question, but if I go and look in the mirror, what am I looking for to know that A, I have it, and therefore B, I might benefit from a tyrosinase inhibitor or a product that contains that?
I mean, I think that over time, our complexion tends to get less even if we don't notice it. And I think you're right that it can occur so gradually that we don't even notice it. I think that it occurs basically in everyone. And so as we age, I think everyone is a candidate. And that's why I included it just in this basic moisturizer product, because I think that people aren't always assessing that quality, but once they use it, they really see the difference. But if you look closely at your skin, just having some areas that are lighter and darker than others, that's hyperpigmentation. So when you have dark spots on your skin, things like that.
And that's mostly from sun exposure?
That happens as we age. So it can happen through sun exposure, and that's the primary way. But it also happens as we age through the formation of advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which can also influence the behavior of melanocytes to produce more melanin.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And they also give a sort of color to the skin. That's another way that we age, is we accumulate these advanced glycation end products, which is a similar reaction to what's happening when you brown beef, like on a grill. That's happening to the collagen and other proteins in your skin. They become glycated, and it actually starts changing your skin to be slightly more yellow as we age. And there's little age detectors that, because these have a particular fluorescent pattern where they can estimate your age based on the fluorescence of your skin from these advanced glycation end products.
A quick ad break to introduce you to one of our very important partners, 38 Terra, who helps make these videos available to you at no cost. 38 Terra's DMN prebiotic, which I'm holding up on screen for those watching on YouTube, is a science-based daily multivitamin for your gut microbes. It's what I take each morning before having my coffee. Taking DMN once per day ensures your gut microbes are well fed, and in turn, they will reward you by producing beneficial compounds like short chain fatty acids. Get 10% off your DMN at 38terra.com using the code THEPROOF. That's 38terra.com and use the coupon code THEPROOF for 10% off. So if we're pursuing a youthful appearance, and I'm not talking about looking 10 years younger than your actual age, but just like looking your age and not looking 10 years older, right? Sort of aging gracefully, so to speak. Addressing pigmentation would be at the top of that list above wrinkles?
I think so. I think, like you're saying, I think it's important to distinguish like aging gracefully from looking younger, because I don't think skincare can really make you look that much younger. I think it can make you look so much better for your age, so much healthier for your age. You can age gracefully with the right products and the right lifestyle changes. But I think trying to pursue looking younger is a slippery slope, because then you start doing things that can make your appearance look strange. So like if you get, too many, if you do too many laser treatments, or if you do aggressive chemical peels, or if you get too many facelifts, things like this, your skin starts looking strange because it's not young skin. When you take the wrinkles away, you don't have young skin, you have old skin that's been stretched, and that looks strange. So I think that just accepting certain parts of aging, like the bone and fat loss in your face, the wrinkles that you'll develop. So there's obviously things you can do to prevent wrinkles, but going too far, at some point you just have to accept it and age gracefully. Yeah.
Do you think the beauty industry, to some extent though, sort of sets an unrealistic expectation? So particularly I imagine. I mean, it affects men as well as women, but and maybe you can comment on this as the only woman at this table. Putting a lot of pressure on them to look younger than they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I think especially now, the more easy it gets to like modify images, and not just modifying images, but also just having the right lighting conditions and things like that makes such a big difference. A lot of the people that we see in these ads and marketing, they don't look like that in real life, you know? So I think there is a lot of pressure to look younger.
Yeah. There's billions of dollars being made off of men wanting to look younger in age of grace or be younger than they are. And in terms of having an even skin tone for people with dark circles, I've heard some mixed reviews as to if you can help dark circles or not. Dark circles would that fall into that category of a not even skin tone or a hyperpigmentation? And can you do anything for dark circles?
So there's different types of dark circles. And
great.
Are we talking about dark circles under the eyes or like dark spots?
Yeah.
Dark circles like under in the eye, this eye socket cavity area being darker or different color and appearance.
There are 3 reasons why someone might have dark circles. One of them is hyperpigmentation. So some people do develop more pigmentation underneath the skin. And if that's the case, then you can use whitening ingredients like resorcinols that we talked about before to lighten up that area. And those work pretty well. But the other ways are harder. So if you have like vascular dark circles, so what you're seeing is sort of the blood underneath the skin. And you can tell because if you sort of pinch it, then it'll get lighter. That is more difficult. So some people use caffeine serums. I haven't found those to be very effective for this use.
But it's a good story. Caffeine wakes you up.
It is.
Sounds like it should work.
It makes sense. And then the third way is just the shape underneath underneath your eye. So it can become hollow and like you can get shadows underneath it. And there's nothing you can do for that besides surgery.
Or makeup.
Yeah, or makeup. Yeah.
So what else can someone do other than topical ingredients like tyrosinase inhibitors to address hyperpigmentation? Are there other kind of less invasive, short of surgery?
I wouldn't call
short of surgery, like
simply.
You mentioned before, lasers and peels, and there's a whole lot of like in-clinic treatments like micro needling and things like this that people would be exposed to. Are any of those helpful for addressing skin tone? Yeah,
absolutely. Certain lasers can be very helpful. So like a pico laser or a Q-switched ND-YAG laser, depending on your skin type, can be helpful for improving pigmentation. But I think the best way to go about it is topicals, because you want to address the problem, not just sort of break up the melanin that's in your skin currently. That can be a good way to get good improvement quickly and could be part of your treatment regimen. But I think that using sun protection so that you don't develop more hyperpigmentation and using topicals to prevent hyperpigmentation in the long run is the best strategy.
Let's come back to lasers. You've mentioned sunscreen and sun protection a few times. I had a previous guest who I believe she said she thought sunscreen was like number one, top of the list when it comes to skincare, the first thing that people should be using regularly. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think the sun damages your skin in so many different ways that sunscreen is absolutely essential. I think most people understand that the UV radiation from the sun can damage your DNA, but the sunlight also damages your collagen directly. It produces reactive oxygen species, which cause cross-linking, fragmentation, and degradation of your collagen. It also increases the expression of the enzymes we were talking about earlier called matrix metalloproteinases, which chew up collagen. So when your skin is injured, like from inflammation from sun exposure, these enzymes are going to start breaking down the skin, as sort of like a wound healing process. And that's going to reduce the collagen density of your skin and make you look older.
So do you think you should always be wearing sunscreen when you're in the sun, or is getting 5 15 minutes of sun exposure without sunscreen. Is that ever a good idea?
I wouldn't ever intentionally expose myself to the sun. That being said, you're going to get some exposure no matter what you do. Sunscreen's not perfect. Like we said, it wipes off. And for someone who's light colored or someone with a light complexion, we don't need a lot of sunlight. Like sunlight through our clothes, even if, they're not UPF clothes, we're wearing normal clothes, we get enough to make a minimal amount of vitamin D. And I think also that if you're concerned about that, you can take a vitamin D supplement. They are extremely effective and inexpensive, and that covers your bases. So that's what I would do.
Well, that is really wild that sun can damage the collagen on our skin. If that doesn't scare people into using sunscreen, I don't know what will. I mean, collagen is so hot. To hear that the sun damages it, the collagen in our skin and in our faces is, yeah, that's wild. Did not know that.
Howdy, friends. Just quickly popping out of the conversation for a brief moment. Off air, we spoke a little more about skin cancer. Certainly, the best way to prevent skin cancer is to protect your skin from sun damage in the first place with clothing, a hat, sunscreen, etc. But we also wondered how we should monitor our skin for signs of skin cancer. How often should we have our skin checked? What does checking our skin look like? Whether moles increase our risk of skin cancer, and signs that we may want to move somewhat quickly to go see a doctor to have a particular spot checked. Here's what Carter had to say.
Anyone can get skin cancer. So if you have a lot of moles, that means you may be at a higher risk for skin cancer. It's not that the moles themselves very frequently turn into skin cancer, although they can, just that you're at a higher risk of developing cancer other places if you have a lot of moles. And in addition, it isn't just people with light skin tones that can be affected by skin cancer. People with darker skin tones can be affected as well, although often the cancer will present in a different location. So it'll be on the white areas of the feet or the palms, or it can even be under the nail bed. So that's the first thing that you can look out for, is if there's a brown streak going down the nail. It's not always cancer, but it very well can be. That can be a melanoma under the nail, and you can get that checked out by a doctor. Other than that, there is a mnemonic, the ABCDE rule for detecting cancer, and you should check out your moles, just a full body, go over with a mirror or two mirrors and look over your entire body and look for moles that may fit this criteria. So A is for asymmetry, and that means that it's not perfectly round. It's an oblong shape. That can be a sign of cancer. B is for border, and so the border should be crisp. If it looks scalloped or smudged, then that can also be a sign of cancer. And that leads into C for color. And so the color of a healthy mole, it should really be one color. So if there's different shades of brown and tan within the same mole, that can be concerning. And D is for diameter. So the diameter of the mole shouldn't be more than 6 millimeters. If it is, maybe get it checked out. And then E is for evolving. So if the mole has changed, that's a bad sign. So if it's growing from the last time that you checked it, or it looks different than it did before, these are reasons to go get it checked out. And it just never hurts to get something checked out. And especially if you're high risk, you have a lot of moles, you're lighter complexion, then it's a good idea to get a doctor to check your moles. Just look over your entire body once a year at least. And yeah, so I think cancer prevention is super important. A lot of people, we think in the near term about making sure we don't age or get hyperpigmentation and things like that when we're protecting our skin from the sun using sunscreen and protective clothing. But really, there can be lethal consequences to exposing yourself to the sun. But if you catch it early, most skin cancers can just be excised. They just take them out, and you live to see another day without too much scarring even. So it's usually when you ignored or didn't notice those lesions that they can become a problem and can either, potentially be life-threatening, or just when they remove them can be disfiguring. So it's always best to go and get it checked out. And in addition, there are other types of skin cancer besides melanoma. So not all skin cancers are just brown mole-looking dots. They can also look like warts or even sort of appear red, kind of maybe acne-like. But if something like that, doesn't go away or is changing or growing over a month or two, then that's definitely something you want to get checked out and could be skin cancer. I hope this helps.
All clear? Good. Let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I think everyone should use a sunscreen. I think if you're using one product, it should be a sunscreen.
But not everyone seems to be convinced by that. So there are certain people that you'll come across on social media that will say, we evolved to be in the sun with our skin exposed to the sun. So how does it make sense at all to block or the penetration of these UV rays from reaching our cells? We need that to be healthy and to thrive. So what would you kind of say to someone who takes that position?
Well, I think for people that say that we evolved to live in the sun, they're missing a few things. One of them is that evolution doesn't really care what happens to you after breeding age, right? Once you've spread your genes, that's it. So if you are dying of skin cancer when you're 80, that doesn't affect evolution. And I think a good analogy is koalas. So a koala,
Koalas.
yeah, koalas, we love them.
Did we see one? Did I show you one?
Well, yeah, Kevin the koala.
Yeah, Kevin.
I saw a koala.
We love koalas.
We saw one in the wild, which is pretty rare.
Koalas have a problem, right? The problem is that
I've heard they have a few problems. I don't know if we want to get into all of them, but
we'll get into one particular problem.
Just quickly, a koala story. So in Byron Bay, where I live in Australia, which I'm not sure whether I should have announced that, but I have now. There's signs everywhere, like careful, koalas crossing.
Yeah.
Right? There's signs everywhere.
Yeah.
You never see them cross. They're nowhere to be found.
But there's signs all over because they're crossing, right? There's no koala crossing
that's almost
anywhere.
like dystopian.
Yes.
Like there were koalas enough to put a sign up, and now they're all gone. Yeah.
But we did see one. One day we saw one.
His name is Kevin.
Was it crossing?
No,
No, he was climbing.
he wasn't doing anything. He was sitting still and napping in his head.
He was a lazy little bear.
Yeah, we love koalas.
They
Okay,
gotta-
so what's the
they gotta
one issue
conserve-
we can talk about on this podcast?
So koalas, they eat eucalyptus leaves. That's all they eat. These are very hard, fibrous leaves, and I don't know if you felt them, but they're hard and brittle. They just chew on these things all day long, and it wears down their teeth. And so one way, there's a limit to a koala's lifespan when the koala grinds down all of its teeth and it can no longer eat eucalyptus leaves.
Poor Kevin.
Then Kevin starves to death.
Poor Kevin.
Yeah. So this,
But Kevin presumably he had made it to an age where he could procreate.
Reproduce.
exactly.
And that's all
exactly.
that.
So these koalas, it doesn't matter that they eventually die from their teeth wearing out because they would have already reproduced by then, hopefully. And so koalas evolved this problem. And I think that people refusing to use sunscreen is sort of like a koala in some futuristic, intelligent koala society saying that, like, I don't need dental work. I don't need you to replace my teeth.
Yes.
Koalas evolved to grind their teeth down, and this is how it should be, you know? I think that the other thing is that humans move around a lot. Like, right now, we have people of light complexion, like myself, in Southern California. I didn't evolve to be in Southern California. The people who are native to this area had a darker complexion to protect them from the sun. And so this isn't a problem for humans because we're a tool-using species. That's our biggest asset. We've evolved to use tools to overcome the problems in our environment. And one of those tools is sunscreen. So I think that refusing to use sunscreen is very unevolved. We're a tool-using species, you know?
Yes, I love that. That is
So-
illuminating.
So if we are in the store buying sunscreen, what are the type of things that we're looking for? What makes a good sunscreen versus sunscreen that you'd say is not so good? Is it just the SPF? Are we buying the same sunscreen for our kids as we buy for ourselves?
Absolutely. I think the best sunscreen is the one that you use every day. So I think that if you're applying a sunscreen and you find it uncomfortable or you don't like it for any reason, that's not your sunscreen. One thing here is that, unpopular opinion, I really don't like mineral filters. I think mineral filters are so cosmetically inelegant. If you're using enough of them, and that's something we can talk about, amount of sunscreen matters. But if you're using enough of a mineral filter sunscreen, you're going to have a white cast, especially if you have a darker skin tone. Not only that, but the ingredients that you need to disperse these pigments within the sunscreen, they're often very thick and greasy feeling. And so you end up with a product that's just really uncomfortable to use. And it also just, the white stuff just gets everywhere, gets on your clothes. I used to use a mineral sunscreen every day for years. And I really just liked the experience, but I was committed to skincare, right? But like I had a layer of like sunscreen residue on the steering wheel of my car, you know? It was so gross.
Why did you previously use a mineral sunscreen? Was that because you were exposed to information that suggested, or marketing that suggested a mineral sunscreen was more effective than a chemical or safer? Or like, why do you think mineral sunscreens in general have become popular?
I think the fear is one of them. So with organic, the first sunscreen that I tried that didn't just cause me to break out in acne happened to be a mineral one. And so that was primarily the reason I found one that didn't cause me acne, or I thought it didn't, but I think that people are afraid. And I think that there's no reason to be afraid because the sunscreens that are used, the sunscreen actives we use regularly are safe at the levels that they're used in these products. They are not going to cause cancer. They're not going to cause endocrine disruption. And that's another thing too, is like one red flag that I see a lot when people are fear mongering about ingredients or products is they'll say that they're an endocrine disruptor. And this is a red flag because the endocrine system, your hormones are kind of promiscuous. So for example, estrogen can bind the androgen receptor and stimulate it. Overall, it's low compared to what like actual testosterone would bind to its receptor. But these hormones can stimulate each other's receptors, and a lot of things that you find in plants or synthetic chemicals, so many of these things are going to activate one hormone receptor or another one in a dish. And I think the important thing is that this system is not like an on-off system, right? It's a summation of inputs. So having some amount of estrogen signaling in a man isn't just going to cause them to immediately grow breasts because the testosterone signal is louder. And so if you're trying to scare people about an ingredient for views, you might as well go look up some studies about it being an endocrine disruptor, because more often than not, it will be. Like,
just about anything will be.
Not anything, but like a good amount of things will be, if you look in hard enough. And
the dose presumably matters.
The dose matters as well. So one thing that I often think about is there are problematic endocrine disruptors, and one of them is lavender oil. So there are actual case studies of parents applying lavender oil to the skin of small boys and it causing them to grow breasts, develop gynecomastia. And it's just strange that we're talking about endocrine disruption in things that have no potential to do that, except in some very specific like circumstances in a dish, when people are using potent endocrine disruptors like lavender oil regularly. And it's not that like I'm afraid of lavender oil either. If I smell lavender, I'm not going to like run out of the room like clutching my nipples, you know?
I don't know. I've seen you do it. I've seen you do it before.
because like you're saying, dose matters, right?
Yes.
Even lavender oil, a potent endocrine disruptor, the dose matters. A small amount's not going to harm me, and I feel safe with that. And it's the same thing with sunscreen. So I think that there's no reason to be afraid. That being said, some people are more sensitive to certain actives than others. So just like anything, just like with allergies or anything, certain people are going to be sensitive to certain ingredients. And so it's all about finding the one that works for you. And I think another thing is that I use pretty much exclusively for my daily sunscreen, Korean sunscreens, because the United States has really backwards sunscreen laws. So most of our sunscreen actives were developed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. A lot of them were approved in the 70s. These are just really old ingredients, and they're not great. They're not photostable, so they break up in the sun. So that requires a lot of stabilizing ingredients. They are absorbed to the skin, so they get into your bloodstream, was a concern for some people. And they can be irritating to a lot of people as well. Some people break out in acne. They're just also very greasy. And we have come so much further in the development of new sunscreen actives. The newer actives that we don't have in the United States but are popular in Europe and Asia, they are photostable, they're non-greasy, they're non-irritating, they don't get absorbed by your skin, they don't get into your bloodstream.
What are these brands specifically that you're
So
talking
there's a lot
about?
of them. Like one of the newer sunscreen actives that's in a lot of popular sunscreens now is called Trizinol. But in general, products that are formulated outside of the United States are going to be using these newer filters. But people are, I think, concerned because they're like, oh, this doesn't have FDA approval, so is it safe? And people are concerned that these newer filters are not FDA approved, so they might not be safe, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Because when the filters that we have in the United States were approved, we didn't have the same standards. The FDA didn't have the same standards as they do today. And one consequence of that is we have legitimately unsafe sunscreen filters that are not used anymore because the industry doesn't want to just like put harmful stuff in their skincare products, but are technically FDA approved just because they got grandfathered in. Like para-aminobenzoic acid is one of them, which can cause DNA damage and can cause hyperpigmentation. And there are a few others. And so these newer actives actually have been tested at much higher standards, but they just aren't approved here because of how cumbersome it is to go through the approval process with the FDA. And this is because in the United States, sunscreen is treated as a drug. So if you look at the back of a sunscreen bottle, it's almost like it's a bottle of Tylenol. It says drug facts. And the drug approval process is such a bureaucratic nightmare. And this has created an issue where people in the United States are not using enough sunscreen because it can be irritating, it can be greasy, it can be uncomfortable. And so it was such a big issue that the Obama administration passed the Sunscreen Innovation Act in 2014 to remove a little bit of this like bureaucratic burden from the process of sunscreen specifically. But it still hasn't been enough. We still haven't gotten new approvals.
Maybe we can put some links to, I mean, you've sent me a few Korean brands that you recommend. Right. So you can still order them online.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like any kind of law enforcement, it doesn't seem like the FDA is sending letters to any of these companies selling Korean or foreign sunscreens in the United States. They're readily available. So it's very easy to purchase them.
Does the SPF matter? Are we just going for like the highest SPF possible, or is there a certain threshold? And once you get to that level, it doesn't really matter how much higher you go?
I think SPF doesn't matter as much as coverage and durability. So what SPF means is they take a certain amount of UV radiation and they burn people to find out the SPF of every sunscreen. And so they'll find out the minimum amount of radiation it takes to burn people, and then SPF is a multiple of that. So if it's an SPF 15, that means it takes 15 times more UV radiation to burn people. So if you can imagine an SPF of 2, it sort of means that that it will take twice as long to burn. You see what I'm saying? And 4 is 4 times as long to burn. And so even an SPF 10 is pretty good protection. It takes 10 times longer to burn. You don't want to just have pretty good protection though. If you can, you want to have the best. But I wouldn't worry as much about the SPF necessarily. If you have, I think SPF 30 is generally recommended, but an SPF 15 can be adequate. The more important thing is that you apply enough of it and you apply it multiple times a day. You don't wipe it off. You make sure that you have good coverage. And so there isn't as good of a rating system for how long sunscreen stays on your skin. And that's sort of a problem. So some sunscreens wipe off very easily. And this is a problem that I had with some of the Japanese sunscreens that I was using, is that they just weren't durable. They wiped off super easily. So even though they were high SPF, they would come off almost immediately.
They did not stand the test of time.
What SPF do you personally use?
I use SPF 50. So I use an SPF 50 sunscreen. But another important thing is the UVA rating. So you have UVB rays. And so SPF is mostly a function of UVB radiation. So UVB is the type that burns you. But UVA radiation can be just as harmful for aging and cancer. But in the United States, we have one designation, which is broad spectrum. So broad spectrum is like, it has to have a certain threshold, but unlike SPF, where we know exactly how much protection we're getting, we don't have that. In Asia, they have a PA system. So they have PA+, PA++. The number of pluses indicates the level of UVA protection, which leads these manufacturers to try to get the maximum protection. And so we get much better UVA protection from these other ones. In addition, in the United States, we only have one approved organic UVA filter, and that's avobenzone. Organic meaning non-mineral, right? So we have zinc and titanium dioxide, which can block UVA, but like I said, they tend to be very cosmetically inelegant, so I don't like them because people generally don't wear them. So I think that a lot of people, they get hyped on the skincare. They're like, I'm going to wear sunscreen every day, and then they use it for a while and they're like, oh, this is greasy. I don't like this. And they're like, maybe I won't put it on a day. It's kind of cloudy. And then eventually they just stop using it.
Yes.
So I see that a lot with people that use mineral sunscreen specifically. They don't tend to use them long term. I get people on a Korean sunscreen and it's almost like a moisturizer. It makes their skin look and feel better. So they wear it, But yeah, they have better UVA protection because we have newer UVA filters, newer organic UVA filters that can go into the product and get really good UVA protection without making the formula greasy.
And this is not just about the effect that the sun's having on aging and skin health, but also risk of cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major risk factor for skin cancer.
Right. So sunscreens are effective, significantly effective in terms of reducing risk of cancer.
Yeah.
Because I think there's still, plenty of folks online that'll say that that's a myth.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate. I mean, it comes from the difficulty of studying this particular topic because like in places that they use sunscreen, they tend to be in the sun a lot more. Like if you're talking about a population in Florida, they're going to use a lot more sunscreen than people in Minnesota. They're also going to have more cancer just because, they live in Florida. They're getting so much more UV radiation. So that complicates things. But there is good evidence that sunscreen does prevent skin cancer.
If parents are selecting sunscreen for their kids, can they just use the same sunscreen that they use, or do they need to buy one that specifically says kids on the front?
They don't need to use one that specifically says kids, but I think that products for kids can be fun for kids to apply. So that goes back to using the sunscreen that you want to put on. And if having a fun packaging, a product designed for children, helps your kids apply sunscreen, then go for that one. But it's not like you need only mineral sunscreen for children. Like we talked about with the endocrine disruption, I don't believe that to be a big problem. So I think that you can apply your own sunscreen to your children. That's fine.
I like that. If we're thinking about the face, what would you say is like a good amount of sunscreen to be applying? Like, what does that look like?
A good amount of sunscreen to apply. I made a video about this on my channel, but in general, I tested with a 3D scanner the surface area of my face to find out if the 2-finger rule was correct. So you're supposed to apply to your fingers 2 lines of sunscreen and then apply that to your face. And the reason we do this is because the amount of sunscreen really matters. So the SPF is measured when they do these tests and they burn people using 2 milligrams of sunscreen per centimeter squared of skin. So if you're applying less than that, then you're going to get less protection. If you're applying more than that, then you'll get more protection. And so you really want to make sure that you're getting the rated protection on the bottle. And you do that by using the 2-finger rule, which I found to be, I mean, it wasn't exact, but it was in the range. So if you don't know how much of sunscreen you should apply, 2 fingers down here, and then just apply that much to your face. Face and neck, use 3 fingers.
But in this case, it sounds like you're saying more is more. The more you use, the more protection you're going to get.
Yeah, the more you use, the more protection you're going to get. But if we're talking about an SPF 50 and we're increasing that protection to an SPF 70, realistically, that's not going to make a difference. And the bigger thing is going to be how well that sunscreen is going to stay on your skin. Yeah. Applying multiple layers can also help with coverage. So that's another thing is there was a study where they applied sunscreen and then they reapplied sunscreen. And the second time they applied sunscreen, since there still was some sunscreen on from the previous thing, you got better protection after the second application. Yeah.
Is it a myth that you're only getting skin damage if your skin is getting burnt? So if you're someone that goes out in the sun without sunscreen on, you're not burning or getting red. Are you still getting that kind of photo damage? You just can't see it, but it's still happening at a cellular level?
Absolutely. So if you go out into the sun, even if you don't burn, you're still accumulating damage. And especially if you're getting tan. Because what instigates this tanning process is proteins that detect DNA damage. So in order for you to get tan, first your body has to detect that damage is present, and then it'll start a signaling cascade, which leads to the production of more melanin. So the only way that you're getting more melanin from the sun, we're not talking about your natural skin tone, but if you get darker from the sun, is to have sustained DNA damage, is to have DNA damage. And so absolutely, being in the sun without burning is harmful. Yeah.
That's interesting though, that from like a attractiveness or like mating preferences, having a tan tends to be something that people would say is attractive.
Yeah.
Yet it's not healthy at all.
Absolutely. I mean, it is interesting. And I think it's very culturally dependent, right? Because in a lot of cultures, it's the opposite. Being lighter is more attractive. And it changes over time. So preference, that's just kind of a preference. But in general, I think that, like we were talking about earlier, like carotenoid coloration has been found to be almost universally more attractive. So that's a way that you can get more color to your skin without getting DNA damage, to get those attractiveness points without damaging your skin.
Yeah, I wonder what the evolutionary explanation is for that. Maybe a tan is kind of signifying that you're someone that is out in nature and exposed to the sun and able to provide and get food and resources.
I think it is like sort of like that. I mean, I think historically lighter skin was generally the more attractive thing. I think
because it meant that you didn't have to be outside working, that you could just have the luxury of being inside all day. So
but I think now it's sort of flipped, where sort of the working class, the laborers for the most part, are working in like office environments, and the people with wealth are out on yachts and enjoying themselves in the sun. So it's just a signifier of wealth.
One or the other.
Just like why did we evolve to think Birkins were cool? I think it's like not really an evolution question as much as like a status question. It's more the question of like, why did we evolve to appreciate, these indicators of status?
But so achieving darker complexion through sunbathing, not a great idea. But what if you're born with a darker complexion? Is there an advantage to people with a darker complexion? Is there something about the biology of their skin that lends to slower aging over time, or does that just come back down to pigmentation?
That comes down to pigmentation, and yes, people with darker pigment have protection from the sun. They develop their risk of skin cancer is decreased. So there's been studies where they find that there isn't a strong association between like how much time people spend in the sun and skin cancer in people of a darker complexion. And so it's a much bigger factor for people with light complexion. But still, even though the risk of skin cancer is lower, and the risk and how much the sun is going to age you is also going to be reduced if you have more melanin protection, you're still going to get an increased rate of visible signs of aging, even if you have a dark complexion. So it's still a good idea to wear sunscreen.
Sunscreen every day, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that's the big take-home message. That's certainly, like I said before, I mean, it wasn't like I was living under a rock in my 20s. I knew sunscreen was important, but I wouldn't apply it liberally, and I'd be a little reckless in terms of reapplying it. So I'd spend far too long in the sun without re-upping the sunscreen, which is kind of the biggest thing that's changed in my 30s.
I'm just following him around with the sunscreen bottle at the beach.
Good.
And we're reapplying now.
Should we talk about? We have this red light therapy mask on the table.
Yes.
They're all over the internet. We have a red light.
We've got
what do you call this panel? We have a big panel as well. But there are a bunch of things that people might be interested in that they either do at home or are thinking about doing at home, whether it's facial massage or red light therapy, microcurrent devices. What's your view on these types of things? What works and what is a waste of money and maybe even a waste of time?
I think in general, skincare devices are my least favorite category. I think that they do really well, like in sales, because they're so visual. Like when you see a video of someone applying a cream that looks like any other cream, like it's not that visually appealing. It doesn't sell that well, I think, compared to like a device where it's like, you look at it and you have a red light mask on, you look at a serial killer and people are like, oh my God, what's she doing?
Yeah.
I think that's very compelling visually, but I think the return on investment for skincare devices is very low. Like the cost of them, but also the amount of time most of these devices take to use, I think is just much better spent optimizing your skincare routine in another way. So I think that first, apply your sunscreen, use a moisturizer, have a very good skincare routine. And if you really want to maximize, you can add these devices on, but just understand that the return on investment is a lot lower. You're going to be spending a lot more time for, marginal benefits. And a lot of these devices don't have a good scientific foundation. And going back to what we were talking about science, like I see a lot, not just devices, but also in skincare, of dubious science. And I like to call this cargo cult science. So it was a term coined by Richard Feynman, the physicist, who saw a lot of science, especially in the medical field, that he thought wasn't up to the rigors of normal science. But it looked like science, used the language of science, but didn't have the same function as science, which is to find truth. And he compared this to the cargo cults, which were in the Pacific Islands. I forget which island exactly, but there were American military installations during World War II, which would come in and they would fly and they would bring the natives supplies, food and other things. And these natives got used to that. And when the American troops left, they thought that these planes were some kind of deity, and they thought that the stuff they thought the air traffic control stuff and the whole airport sort of situation was some ritual to summon them. So they made these satellite dishes and runways and other things, and they made these helmets, and it looked kind of like an airport when they came back and they saw these people doing it, trying to summon these planes by doing something that looked like an airport, but clearly didn't have the function of an airport, right? They didn't actually have a radio. They had something that looked like a satellite dish, but they didn't have a radio to call the planes down, but they just thought it looked like that. And so that is sort of the quality of science that we're seeing. It's cargo cult science. They called these cargo cults because they were trying to summon cargo. Yeah.
Richard Feynman.
Yeah.
I have one of his books on my list to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that when we're reading scientific papers, going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's important to understand that cargo cult science exists, that there's often an agenda behind the papers. And that doesn't mean the paper is bad, because like I said, the papers generally did what they said they did, and they got the results they said they did. They said, but the conclusions are often dubious. And the way they conducted the research, you have to ask, was this the right way to test the question, or is this cargo cult science?
Well, I know that you have red light panels in your apartment because Simon and I were there.
Yeah.
So we know we use the panel.
Right. So there must be some role for what's the difference between a red light panel, or why do you use that? Is it for skin or other?
Yeah. So I use that for skin. Like I was saying, the reason I got into red light therapy was because so many people asked me about whether it was legitimate. So I bought a bunch of panels, and now I use them, the panels, but not the masks.
You got a lot of panels in there.
Now I made videos about red light, and then they all send me panels. Yeah.
I'm like,
so I have
can I take one
a
home,
whole wall
dude?
of panels. And yes, red light therapy is effective. However, most of the devices that you see in these ads for the masks and other sort of little skincare devices, they are not sufficient, because LED therapy requires a lot of light. And most of the studies, at least the ones that are good, the high quality ones, they use a high fluence. And fluence in light terms is sort of like the dose. And the problem with masks and other smaller devices is
Can't get a high dose.
Is that they contact
this little cord.
They contact the skin, and it's not that they're using cheap LEDs they're not powerful enough to save money or something like that. The problem is that powerful LEDs get really hot. And you can't have them in contact with your skin, or you would burn your skin. You have to have them away from your face so that they can be cooled with heat sinks and fans and things, so that it can produce enough light to change your skin. And people often think that because it's closer, it's going to be more effective. So that's the argument I see a lot, is I'm going to buy a mask. I've even seen people, they have a panel, a perfectly good product, and they're like, I got to buy a mask because it's closer. It's going to be more effective for my face specifically. And that's just not true. It's kind of like saying, like the light from your phone is going to be brighter on your face than the sun, because the sun is however many millions of miles away. So it's not going to be as bright as the light from your phone, because
That's amazing.
it's just your phone is just a completely different type of object from the sun. It's a different power level, right? And the same thing with panels and masks. Panels are just so much more powerful that they are losing, you know, about half the amount of light that they're putting out by the time it gets to your face. But half of what a panel's putting out is like 50 times higher than what a mask is putting out. And so if
Panels over masks.
I do red light therapy, and for people that are interested, I think it's a good way. You can reduce hyperpigmentation, you can increase collagen density, you can reduce inflammation with red light therapy. It's not the first thing I'd recommend. So first, start with a good core routine. But red light therapy is effective if you want to like put in the money and time to do it. But I would definitely recommend using a panel and over a device that contacts your skin.
For 10 or 20 minutes or something like that.
10 or 20 minutes is typical, but it really depends on the output of each panel.
Right.
So
Tawny's pretty good at that. That's part of her nightly
It
routine.
doesn't really take up any time, because in the morning when I brush my teeth, I have it on some of the time, and at night I just brush my teeth for 3 minutes.
Well, how close is it when you're brushing your teeth?
Girl, I'm in a malasana squat as close as possible with my eyes closed.
How
Brush
close
my
is
teeth
it
for
meant
as
to
long
be?
as possible.
Typically around like 6 to 12 inches is what you should be. Yeah.
I'm hitting 6.
Yeah.
I'm about 6 inches away.
Closer than that, you might not get like, just because of how the lenses work, you might not get even coverage. So like some areas might be brighter than others. It'll still work just fine. But around 6 to 12 is typically the sweet spot.
What about gua sha? Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, gua sha.
Gua sha.
I
Sounds
think so.
so fancy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but is gua sha effective? It's obviously pretty low cost.
Right.
You see a lot of people using it online.
I mean,
Maybe explain what it is as well.
Yeah, gua sha. I'm not an expert on gua sha, but you have
I am. I'm just kidding.
you have a little stone or
Yes.
other hard object, and you push on the skin to move the lymph fluid away or push away some of the extracellular fluid in your body. And it really depends what outcome we're talking about. So I've seen a lot of arguments where they're saying gua sha like increases blood flow to your skin, and so therefore the
It's beneficial.
the skincare ingredients will be absorbed better.
Oh,
And that's a silly claim, because that's the opposite of what you want, right? When you don't want the skincare actives you apply to your skin to be swept away into your bloodstream. You want them to act locally. And this is something like when we're using lidocaine to numb the skin locally. So if you're going to get some sort of procedure, you get numbing injected into your skin. That lidocaine is often combined with epinephrine, which constricts blood flow, reduces blood flow, so that lidocaine doesn't move around. It stays where it's supposed to be and doesn't get into your bloodstream.
Yeah.
And so on the face of it, like with a lot of these devices, you see these silly arguments. That doesn't mean it's not effective for anything. But I think it shows a misunderstanding of how the skin works a lot of times. But I think that gua sha can be effective in terms of just like moving fluid away to get a temporary effect. But other than that, I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, I just use it when I use my own hands. I don't even use a gua sha, but I love facial massage for depuffing and just, feeling a little more sculpted in the morning on days I'm filming. But I don't know that I don't claim that it has crazy benefits, but I do notice a difference in the puffiness and the appearance of my skin, which I love. But
if you can,
you don't even need the gua sha; you just use your hands.
Right. I think that's great. Yeah. If you see a benefit from doing that, then that doesn't cost anything,
and it's safe.
And it's safe. Yeah.
As long as you don't have really sharp nails.
What about you walk into some type of beauty cosmetic clinic, and there's a pamphlet of all the things that they have on offer, and you can get a facial, so just like a standard facial where people are, we've all done one, or a lot of us have. I have, where they're rubbing creams on your face and put the cucumbers over your eyes, and it feels amazing. And usually afterwards, you look like you have a nice glow and whatnot. Are they really doing anything of significance when it comes?
Are they worth the investment?
To skin health?
They're not normally cheap.
I think that if you enjoy them, if that's something that makes you feel good and it's relaxing for you, it reduces your stress, then it's okay to get facials. But I don't think you should expect like that money to be worth it in terms of skincare results. So if they're exfoliating the skin, that can, you know, cause your skin to look temporarily smooth, or if they're doing something to hydrate your skin temporarily, that can make you look better that day. But I think in general, like when we're talking about skincare studies, it's not often that we're talking about they did something once and it had this long-term benefit. They apply the same thing usually daily for, you know, 8 to 12 weeks, and they see some long-term effect. And I think that's more what we should be looking for. In addition, you want to find the ingredients that work well with your skin, and this can take a really long time. So when you go and get a facial, they're going to apply their favorite ingredients, which are good for most people, but one of them might affect you negatively, and it might not be that day. It might come later, and then you end up in a cycle of getting these facials thinking that they're going to help, when really what you should be doing is finding your own routine with the products that you know are safe for your skin and don't cause any sort of irritation.
What about chemical peels or microdermabrasion?
In general, I think that
I've done my research.
I don't like. So let's talk about microdermabrasion. That's a form of physical exfoliation. In general, I don't like this. I don't think it's good for your skin. I think that it can damage your skin's moisture barrier and cause some hypersensitivity. I don't think it's the worst thing. So something like that could be done if you want your skin to look smooth for like an event or something. I think that's totally fine. But I don't think that that's something that we should think we need to do for our skin for long-term benefits. Microneedling, I think it is effective. I think that it's effective with or without PRP. And I don't know if it's the highest in terms of return on investment like we're talking about, but it's definitely something that you can consider.
The other treatment that I think is becoming increasingly popular is lasers, and you mentioned that before. There are lots of different types of lasers. I guess, what are your thoughts on lasers generally, and then more specifically, are there certain types of lasers that are effective for certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that lasers can definitely improve the skin. Lasers are expensive, so not for everyone. And there are many different types of lasers, as you said. And I can't go over all the different types now, but definitely go to a laser dermatologist and, you know, ask for your skin tone, for your outcome that you want, whether it's hyperpigmentation or reducing wrinkles, something like that. They can help guide you to find the right laser treatment for you. I generally prefer lasers to IPL. Lasers generally will produce one wavelength of light that can target specific things. So like, it might be absorbed by melanin more than it's absorbed by the rest of your skin. So you can break up melanin, right, for example. Or it could be absorbed by your blood more than other things, so that it can cause damage to blood vessels in your skin that are causing telangiectasias, or little red spots, right? Or the veins that are apparent on your skin. So those are two different types of lasers that we use for those things, two different wavelengths. Whereas an IPL treatment will use a range of wavelengths, and so it's less targeted, and it can cause more thermal damage to the skin for the same effect to the actual thing you want to target. In addition to that, I would say that generally try to look up the different types of lasers that are available. I think that there can sometimes be bias in terms of what the provider will want to use based on the laser that they purchased most recently. These lasers are very expensive, and they lease them generally. And so they're going to want to use their new toy, one, to pay back, you know, because they're paying for it and they want to get their return on investment, but also they're excited about it, right? Because they're getting the shiniest new laser. So for example, like a lot of providers are really using a lot of pico lasers right now. So they're lasers that have a really fast sort of flash of the light. And this can help reduce like thermal damage while targeting the tissue. And so this is especially great for people with a darker complexion. But someone with a lighter complexion, in some studies, a Q-switch laser, which is the same thing, but like a little bit longer in terms of the pulse width, can be more effective. So these older, cheap lasers may be more effective in lighter skin tones, but I think that a lot of times you would see someone always recommending a pico laser if they had one. And the downtime is lower, so that makes sense. I mean, people like it when their skin isn't as messed up. But But that goes, and also like if you want to reduce wrinkles, then maybe a fractional CO2 laser might be better for that particular thing, especially if you have a light skin tone and you're not prone to hyperpigmentation. But that's sort of an older laser that, you know, a lot of clinicians wouldn't necessarily go to first because it's just an older technology.
What's the difference between a fractional CO2 laser and CO2 laser? Are they different? I think like on TikTok, I'm noticing a lot of people talking about CO2 laser under the eye specifically.
Yeah. So I think CO2 on TikTok, a few things. One is like when you see a CO2 laser on TikTok, a lot of times I see a video where the skin is like immediately tightening. Like, have you seen that? Yeah. And I think that's a little deceptive because what's happening there is that the skin is dehydrating. Water is leaving the skin very fast. So it's just like squeezing up. That's not like a long term. It doesn't do that permanently. It does tighten the skin a little bit and reduce wrinkles.
But not to
It's
that
effective
degree.
for those things, but not to that degree and not immediately like that. But a fractional CO2 laser is one where the beam is split and moved around so that you're only putting small holes, usually about 0.2 millimeters in the skin with a lot of healthy skin in between. So you can change sort of the coverage rate. So like maybe 50% of your skin is actually getting burned and the skin around each one of these holes can go in and heal over it very quickly compared to a like fully ablative CO2 laser, a non-fractional one that's just going to burn the entire surface of your skin off. And these can be incredibly effective, like transformational procedure really. But there's a lot of downtime. You look like a burn victim. It's really gruesome and painful, but that can be effective. So generally, a few sessions of a fractional CO2 laser should, you know, come close to the effect of a fully ablative laser. So generally, what I recommend.
Is there any risk of kind of overdoing it, doing it too frequently, or if you're too young and you're doing it, for example?
It depends on the type of laser that we're talking about. I think that there is a certain over-treated look that you can get. I see it more with like phenol peels, like heavy chemical peels where people can look waxy, you know, and I see that with laser a little bit, but not as bad. I think that you shouldn't need too many sessions of a CO2 laser. Something like an ND YAG laser, you can do that multiple times to keep, you know, improving the results for pigmentation and things like that.
Are there any emerging treatments? So lasers aside, is there anything that you've seen in the research and you're kind of keeping your eyes on that might be effective and available in the future?
There's a lot of things, but in general, I'm just more skeptical of new things, right? I don't like to recommend or talk about things that are brand new because oftentimes, like we said, they're supported by weak science. That doesn't mean they don't work, but I just like to see a technology mature. I like to see more long-term studies, long-term data. So
It takes a little more than a TikTok video.
takes more than a TikTok video, yeah, for me.
Yeah, shame on you for ruining TikTok for me. I thought it was reality.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it is. You just gotta curate your algorithm, you know.
We should hit acne before we let you go
Okay.
because I know you got to get on a flight. So let's start from the beginning. What is acne caused by?
So acne is caused by a sort of orchestra of things. So what happens is your pore has to close up. And so there's hyperkeratinization, which means the skin gets hard, and it also kind of can get overgrown. And this plugs up the pore. Then the pore is going to be filled with oil. And that oil can be fed on by Cutibacterium acnes. So these C. acnes bacteria can have an enzyme, lipase. They have lipases that break up the triglycerides in your oil. And then your immune system has to react to these bacteria. And the important things to note here are that C. acnes is a perfectly normal part of your skin's microbiome. It's a friendly bacteria. And so it will only cause acne when the right conditions are met. One, it's aerobic. So inside a pore where it's not getting a lot of oxygen, that's when it thrives. And in addition, it needs to be in an inflammatory environment where your skin is going to mount an inappropriate immune response to that bacteria. And this is important to understand because it's not that your face was dirty. It's not that your face was grimy. It's not that you got bacteria on your face. This bacteria should be on your skin, right? And it's not really anything that's occurring on the surface of your skin. It's something that's going on inside the pore. So one thing that I always talk about when people are suffering from acne, a lot of times people have the tendency to try to cleanse their skin more when that's the opposite of what you want to do. Because In terms of skincare ingredients, I think that cleansers are not necessary. I think that they can be beneficial in some contexts, but in general, surfactants, the soapy chemicals that are in a cleanser, they're going to damage the proteins and lipids and things in your skin, and they're going to damage your lipid barrier.
Wait,
they're going to damage your
So we're not
your moisture
using
barrier.
a face wash in the morning or at night before we do all the things that we've spoken about.
So let me get to that. So they can damage your skin's moisture barrier, right? And some surfactants are more gentle than others. So a gentle cleanser can be used in certain cases, like if you need to wash makeup off or your face is legitimately dirty from something, like you can use a cleanser. But I think that most people think that cleansing is like a core part of a skincare routine. And I don't believe that to be the case. I think that we should do it selectively when we need to. And there are, like, if people are suffering from fungal acne, right? From Malassezia folliculitis, like in those cases, it's plausible that washing the oils off might help a little bit with that. But I think for most people, when they have problem skin, I oftentimes recommend to stop using a cleanser. And a lot of times it gets better. Their skin improves. They get less acne. So I would use a cleanser sparingly.
So what is the best approach then, or best ways to treat acne?
So I think the most effective, like, active ingredients that you can use for acne over the counter are going to be benzoyl peroxide and adapalene. And you can also use these two things together. So I'd recommend starting with adapalene, just waiting until your skin isn't affected negatively, like isn't irritated, right? So like I was describing before with the 2-week progressive acclimation. Once you acclimated that, you're using it every day. Once your skin stops being irritated by that, then you can add benzoyl peroxide if your acne hasn't subsided. Because for a lot of people, adapalene alone will be enough, and it will hardly irritate your skin. It'll clear your skin very well. But if it's not the case, you can also add benzoyl peroxide. And there's a prescription product called Epiduo, which combines these two things, but you can also do this over the counter. And you can do this either morning, night, or at the same time. Because like we were talking about before, adapalene is highly stable. So it doesn't get broken up by benzoyl peroxide, which can be a problem because it can oxidize other retinoids.
How does that compare to taking something orally like Accutane?
I think that taking oral Accutane is going to be the most effective solution. So personally, I've been on low-dose Accutane. That's why I was talking about I stopped tretinoin, because I got on low-dose Accutane or isotretinoin. And it was such a relief because I was using adapalene and benzoyl peroxide, and those were great. Like, they pretty much completely cured my acne, or no, they treated my acne effectively. But they were cumbersome, like applying these things to my face every day. And then I would get really stressed if I missed a day and things like that. And also the benzoyl peroxide can stain clothing. Once I got onto low-dose Accutane, and low-dose Accutane, now that there's more recent studies, we know that low-dose Accutane can be almost as effective as the traditional dosing like regimen, but with much less side effects. So for me personally, I take low-dose Accutane and I have no side effects except for slightly dry lips. And my skin is less dry now that I'm on low-dose Accutane compared to when I was using topical acne treatments. And I never worry about acne, pretty much at all. And it's been such a big relief to my life. So if you can access low-dose Accutane, and keep in mind that I'm chief skincare scientist of a company that prescribes Accutane among other prescription acne treatments called Honeydew. So Honeydew Care. And but it's just been such a pleasure to be on low-dose Accutane.
Yeah, I suffered from acne my whole life. Everyone was like, "Oh, it'll go away once you're not a teenager," and it didn't go away in my 20s, my late 20s, now into my 30s. I started spironolactone. Yeah. I think like 2-3 years ago, and it was absolutely life-changing. Just like not having to worry about if I have 1 ounce of sugar, if I'm going to wake up with something insane on my face the next day. Yeah, having to be so diligent.
I know the
about
feeling.
Every little thing.
I know the feeling. Yeah.
So.
And I would get so like, it would get in my head so much. Like, even though like certain things I know aren't correlated with acne, I would still just get in my head about it because I was just so concerned about, waking up with a breakout, like you're saying, and
it's just a pain
getting on Accutane really helped with that. And I've had no side effects. My labs, my blood work is just perfect. Like no issues with my liver, enzymes, or cholesterol, anything like that. No dry skin, just a little dry lips and no acne. So it's been great.
Is there any truth to Accutane affecting mood at all?
No. More recent research has shown that there likely isn't a correlation between use of Accutane and mood or suicidality and things like that. This started with a senator who had a son who unfortunately lost his life to suicide. And then so he was a big proponent of creating legislation to regulate Accutane more and spreading this message that he lost his son, so he wanted to attribute it to something, I think, and Accutane was the most proximal thing that was changed. So I think that unfortunate event in history really changed the narrative on Accutane and has really prevented people from getting an extremely effective treatment that would have saved their lives. So
I had no idea you could basically microdose Accutane either, because taking the hero dose that is prescribed is so gnarly on the body and the organs and all the things. But lo and behold, you can microdose these things.
I really feel like the traditional dosing regimen is an overdose, and we should, and may be appropriate for some people, right? If they have very severe acne, if they're not responding to a low dose, maybe we can try a higher dose. But I think that more providers should learn about low-dose Accutane, look over the studies, and start using it in their practice more. And I think a lot of problems that people face is, one, it's incredibly burdensome when you go to get Accutane from a doctor, because there's a system called iPledge. Especially if you're a woman, you have to get pregnancy tests every month. Yep. It's very burdensome. So
and I almost went on Accutane, and I went to that appointment and was like, okay, never mind. Let's try something else.
Yeah, but
do you need to come off Accutane if you're a woman and you're wanting to have a child?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So if you're a woman, you need to be on 2 simultaneous forms of birth control to be on Accutane.
2.
Because Accutane can cause birth defects. Yeah.
But it would be okay if it was the male that was taking Accutane? Mm-hmm. Or is it the same case? Will it affect the sperm?
It should not affect the sperm, but if you are having problems reproducing, then you should talk to a specialist about that and discuss whether Accutane could be an issue. But in general, it isn't associated with birth defects to have a male on Accutane in the same way it is with a woman.
Let's talk a little more about pimples.
Yeah, so since we're talking about acne.
Sometimes no matter what someone does, they'll have a pimple. Or pimples.
Or a blemish. We'll call them blemishes.
Tony calls them blemishes or zits.
No, they're blemishes.
Zits probably my least favorite term. I don't like that.
Not zits. Definitely
What's the best way to manage, treat, look after a zit?
A blemish. I just want to know, do I have to, can I touch
should
that
you
thing, or should I leave it away? Leave it alone?
I think first, I think that it's important to understand that you should always be preventing rather than treating.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about using we're talking about benzoyl peroxide, talking about adapalene, these are things that are going to take a long time, weeks to months, to start working. You shouldn't apply them just on top of a pimple and expect it to go away and just keep doing that cycle over and over again. You should be thinking about how this drug or treatment is going to be affecting your acne 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now. You should be thinking ahead. When you do have a pimple, you generally don't want to pop it. And I think this
so
confuses people because on one hand, a lot of dermatologists, especially on social media, are saying, don't pop your pimples, right? But on the other hand, they go and they have videos with millions of views popping pimples. So it's like, what's the difference, right? And I think there's a technique. And I pop my pimples, or I used to when I had them before Accutane.
Blemishes.
My blemishes.
In this household.
And I'm going to tell you how to do it, okay? So you take a little lancet, right? And this is the difference.
A what?
Lancet. So you can buy them at any drugstore. They're used in these little devices. They're spring loaded, and they're little needles on the end of a little plastic thing. They're little tiny little needles, 2 or 3 millimeters long, something like that. And they go into this device that's it's spring loaded. It hits your finger. It causes it to bleed, so the diabetics can check their blood sugar. But because so many people use this for diabetes, they're extremely inexpensive. You can go and buy hundreds of them for almost nothing. And you can definitely injure your skin. So be very careful. But what you want to do is you want to take the little needle, and they're sterile when you take the cap off. So don't touch it on anything. Sterilize your skin, and then take the needle and brace your hand on your face like this so your hand's not moving around, because it's very careful. And then you take it and you push it into the head of the pimple gently. And the key here is that it should not hurt. You don't have nerve endings on the head of that pimple. So if you're feeling it at all, take it out and go slowly and gently. You don't need anything to come out. Just puncture the head of that pimple. And then you can take one of those comedone extractor tools and you can press it very gently. And this is the key. Once you've created that channel for the pus to leave the pimple, you should not have to press very hard. So just gently press, and if it doesn't come out, maybe try to puncture it again. If it still doesn't come out, leave it alone, right? And in that way, you can extract your pimples without causing a lot of inflammation and leading to increased scarring.
Is that a cosmetic thing just to make it look better, or will that help speed up the recovery?
That will help speed up the recovery. In terms of like visually how it looks, right? So then after that, I would recommend putting one of those little hydrocolloid patches on. And so I'd recommend, Starface or something. That's very popular. You know what I'm talking about. They're little blue stars. They're okay. They're okay, but I would recommend using regular hydrocolloid patches. Maybe at nighttime, use the regular ones. Hydrocolloid is the superior material there. And then just put that over that. And if you don't want to go out and find these things, there's a product called Acne that you can buy. I think they sell it on Amazon, but it comes with little lancets, the same ones that I'm talking about, and a little hydrocolloid patch. And you can use those.
Interesting. So you said you kind of pierce the head. So is this only effective if it's a pimple that has like a white head?
Yes.
What if it's a blind pimple, so you can feel like there's something under there?
You should not extract that.
Gotcha.
Very good point. Very good point. You should wait until it's ready to extract. You should wait for that head to be there, and until then, leave it alone. And you could also, the hydrocolloid patches will help the healing process. That's why you put it on after. But a hydrocolloid patch, part of the function is to make you not touch your pimple, like just to protect it from yourself. So put that patch on there.
I need that. I need to be
if you have a pimple.
I've been fortunate through my life. I haven't had a lot of like whitehead pimples, but I used to get like blind pimples, like sort of like in this kind of region, right? Mostly in my early 20s or teens. Yeah. And I would know not to touch them, but the urge just to keep squeezing them was just always there. Yeah, and it hurts so much.
I think there is something innately satisfying, and that's why I'm sharing this, because I think that if I tell people just not to pop their pimples at all, they're going to. Like there's some desire to do it. I think that educating people on the right way to do it is valuable. Is valuable, yeah.
Carter, if someone has acne scars and that's affecting their confidence, is there anything they can do about those?
So retinoids can help a little bit with acne scars. It really depends on the type of acne scars you have. So if you have like, but there's something called TCA cross, where if you have pinpoint scars, they can apply an acid that can help heal that over. Or they can use subcision, where they sort of wipe around a cannula underneath the skin. Laser treatments can be effective. In general, I would say that you should go to a dermatologist to get your acne scars treated. The things that you can do at home, like retinoids, are going to help, but they're not going to be super effective.
Are there any kind of major myths about acne or pimples that we haven't covered that you see online that you want to kind of clear up or bust?
Clear up, get it?
Yeah, I think that mostly acne is not.
Was that the dad joke?
No, that wasn't, but it could be. It could be. Do you want one?
Yes.
Do you want one? Let me think.
Let him answer the question.
What?
Right?
I've got one, and it works because it's kind of related to skin.
Yeah.
And I know you like belly buttons. What did the policeman say to his belly button? Sir, you're under arrest.
I thought it was going to be acne related.
Was that good or bad?
My favorite part of the dad joke.
That was so good.
Or Simon's face.
Sir, you're under arrest. Anyway, you may continue.
Yeah, I think just going back to what we talked about before, I think
let's pretend that didn't happen.
Acne is just not caused by dirty skin. I think that we need to get over that. I think that inherently we want to believe that. Like, we feel ashamed of our acne, and acne can look dirty. I mean, it can look sick. And I think we need to treat our skin well and be gentle to it and not over cleanse it or try to sanitize it, because that's not the problem.
So 2 big takeaways for me are sunscreen, frequent reapplication, and maybe I don't need to be washing my face and behind my ears so much.
Yeah. Well, I would recommend daily washing of the face.
Needs to happen like every now and then. Sorry. You go.
Yeah. We so don't I suggest you do wash your face twice a day, just with lukewarm water, and then use a cleanser as needed when you have to wash something off of your face. Yeah.
Anecdotally, it is amazing. When I stopped, I had acne, right? I was doing all the drying and the cleansing and the drying. It wasn't doing anything. And when I started hydrating more and cleansing with gentle cleansers, like it actually did help. So hearing you say that and looking back and reflecting, it is amazing how doing what you think will help usually might not actually be the helpful thing. And it might be to just take your foot off the pedal a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think with skincare, often the problem is people are doing too much.
Girl, I was doing the most. Yeah. I was freaking out.
Yeah.
All right, I think we did it. Maybe before we let you get out of here, and hopefully we can convince you to come back. And
I feel like I'm proposing. the fans.
I'm like, this way, babe.
Should I get down on one knee?
Offer him slug.
Okay. Carter, Eviba. Will you come back and join us for another episode to talk about rosacea, psoriasis, dermatitis, eczema, all the things?
I will, Simon.
No, show us how to slug.
Show us how to slug.
So slugging.
Oh, it's the best. Look at this thing.
So slugging, I think that
we have no fun here, as you can tell.
Yes.
But really, you just need a thin layer over the entire surface of the skin, just like that.
I do a little more than that.
A little more is fine.
Yeah, I'm a side sleeper. It's sad that I sometimes wipe off the sides.
You don't need to do a lot. So just enough to cover the skin is enough here.
But do you see that shine, ladies and gentlemen, boys and
girls?
girls?
Am I looking sluggy?
Yeah, it's not that crazy. The amount I apply will get me more sluggy. I'm going to hand this over to Simon. You're going to show us how you slug now.
Yeah, Simon dips his nose right into it.
Slug it.
And rotates it.
I used to do it for him every night. Give him a face massage. Now he has autonomy over his night routine.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
All right. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on your podcast. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you so much for talking about my product too. That was very sweet.
Yeah, of course.
I am the biggest fan. I tell everyone about it. I have all of Aloe using Slug and contacting you personally for skincare.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate both of you guys.
Biggest fan, dude.
Thank you. We love your commitment to science and keeping it fun and keeping it evidence-based. Where can we send people? Where can they find you online?
They can find me on my TikTok account at Eviba Carter. I'm going to start posting my content to TikTok and YouTube as well. It's Eviba Carter on all of them.
Because you're already on TikTok, but now we're going to find you on YouTube.
Yeah. Now I'm going to start posting my content. I just put more work to make different versions of my content.
Sick.
But and if you want to start slugging, you can go to eviba.skin again.
Eviba.com,
Eviba.com.
We got the .com now.
Okay, we got the .com.
We bought the .com. Yeah.
We've updated.
And Eviba, short for evidence-based.
Eviba is, it's short for evidence-based. So it's a word that I made up. I would use as a shorthand. So people would ask me like, is red light therapy Eviba? Is it evidence-based? And so I named my company after that.
Okay. And again, not a sponsor of this show. I make $0, but highly recommend.
They pay me for this product.
Maybe you should. Yeah, actually, we do pay you for
this. I'll give it to you for free. It just sends me money.
And where can we send folks to find you? YouTube.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're the star of the show.
I thought it was you.
Let's get people doing yoga. Let's get people doing yoga.
Well, I have over 300 classes on Aloe Moves. It's Aloe's platform, but I also teach for free on YouTube. I post a class every week, both yoga and fitness.
And stay tuned for me on Aloe Moves.
Oh, hey!
Watch me injure myself.
But I also
she was trying to teach me how to crow pose.
Oh yeah, I did
almost
teach you
died.
crow pose. Yeah, I should have had a block underneath your face, but this was like 6 years ago, so we're just gonna call it a wash.
All right. I think we did
Thanks
it.
for having me.
Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.
There you have it, friends. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did and want to stay up to date with future episodes, be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow on Apple or Spotify. Finally, thank you for showing up and the effort that you're making to take control of your health. I look forward to hanging out with you again in the next episode.